Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
You are listening to the Brilliance Business Show. I am your host, Mark Stephen Pooler. Conversations with leading experts in business. And today I have an incredible guest, Marc Champagne. Marc is co-founder of Thei, the digital journal mental fitness app. And Marc is a podcast host where he unlocks the minds of top performers. Marc, welcome to the Brilliance Business Show.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here, Marc, and I'm looking forward to a conversation with you today. Before I get started, I just need to make a legal disclaimer that Marc is not offering legal advice or legal assistance. So let's get on with the show. Marc, can you share with our listeners a little bit about yourself and about your business?
Absolutely. So I co-founded Thei about 2 years ago with my brother-in-law and business partner, obviously now. But I'd say that the whole journey down this path of mental fitness, as you described in the intro, started probably 10 or 12 years ago, where at one point when I was working in the corporate world, I was getting up earlier in the morning just to try to prime my mind with positive things, for example, and started learning, started researching, what some of the top performers, not just professionally, but personally as well, like what they were doing, right? And what kind of practices that they were doing before everyone was up and before the day, or the craziness of the day, I should say, would start. And I bring that up just because as I've been reflecting back on even the last couple of years of Thei, it really boils down to some of those earlier years, 10 or 12 years ago, because that's where a lot of the foundational practices were, at least on my side, discovered, and where I started seeing benefits of doing things like journaling or meditation, and just creating space, I think, is a good way to put it for your mind, just like we do for our physical body when we prioritize physical exercise, right? It's just a form of training. So fast forward to a couple of years ago, there was just a moment where there was a frustration on my side where, there was a lot of content out there, podcasts, blogs, you name it. Anyone that purchases books, biographies, you typically see how they're loaded full of really powerful reflective questions that those authors or those speakers are leaving throughout their content. And I'd be jotting those down in different with different solutions, whether that was a pen to paper or typically it was in a digital fashion. But there was nothing out there that would combine that content with some sort of guided practice or approach to help people and really to help myself at that time to take those questions and then be able to reflect on them on the spot. And that's essentially how Thei started in the early days. It was, these are powerful practices that have been around for thousands of years, but they're talked about in a weird kind of woo-woo way that I think really have prevented their mainstream adoption. Yet at the center of everything we're doing, and this is so apparent through the podcast, anyone that you can think of that you may look up to, whether those are athletes or top business executives, they're all doing some sort of reflective work for their mind to keep things sharp, right? So it's just a matter of how can we share these insights and almost these superpowers with people in a relatable and practical way.
You have made some great points there, Marc. All the top performers that I've ever researched or I've got to know, they all do have really strong things that they do every single day, like visualization, like meditation, like journaling. It's so important to look after your mind, and I feel it's a great thing that you have taken all of those ideas, but you've also put some kind of guidance to go along with them to keep people on track. I think that's great what you're doing.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. We're doing our best every day.
That's all you can do, Mark. Can you share with us who are your customers, who are your clients?
Yeah, well, right now the majority, I mean, it started out where we put out the app for the general public, just to see whether other people would be interested in what we're creating. And we're super grateful for this, because we at this point we still haven't put any paid ads in place, but we ended up over the first, I'd say 13, 14 months to reach about 80 million people around the world. And a lot of that due to a lot of features by Apple in over about 145 countries. So at first it started out as a public offering, and it continues to be available for the public. But where we're exploring and where things have naturally progressed is in the corporate space. And it started out with the podcast, as I'd be interviewing people from In and Lego and VaynerMedia and all these different companies. And now we're starting to realize there are gaps, obviously in the corporate space, as well as different generations are coming up through university and college and coming into the workplace. The younger generation is very much purpose driven and in tune with trying to prioritize their wellness in general. And there's a bit of a gap on how can organizations help support that, those needs, right? And then, I mean, there's no surprise. I mean, we're in a mental health crisis, I'd say, across the world, with the mental health rates just skyrocketing for many reasons, right? So something needs to be done, right? There no longer is sleep enough to help heal and repair our body with the amount of content and notifications we're hit with every day. So a little bit of a long answer to your question, but where we're moving now is really to help organizations, specifically with the their top teams, to again unlock their mind and ideally protect their mind so that they're more resilient to stress and really anything that would cause any type of mental health related concerns. And the byproduct of that, thankfully, is that you end up with happier people, right? And when you have happier people, you have more productive people, and you have less sick days and all of that. So the science really supports these initiatives. And on our side, where it's a bit unique, thankfully, is that we have, because of the public app, we have a tremendous amount of data, and not in a scary Facebook way that's rolling out these days, but we have data in terms of what type of questions people are asking themselves, or what type of content they're interested in. Because over the last year or so, we've been able to capture about 175,000 prompts or reflective questions in the app. So then when we're going into companies, we're not going in blind. Like, we've validated the type of practices or the questions that we can help teams in the corporate environment adopt, and they've been validated at scale globally. So this is where this is fairly fresh right now. This is where we're moving. It's something that we're really excited about, because so many of our hours are obviously spent in the workplace. So if we can help people at work and provide some of these resources and insights, and it's not just to sell Keo as a tool or an app, it's really selling the practices of the hundreds of people that fortunately have been able to interview, right, that have spent their entire life figuring out the different things that work for them, so that we can then customize that for the teams in those organizations.
Firstly, what a great thing with the amount of reach that you have managed to reach, Mark, that's a big number. And to do that without starting with Facebook ads, that is a really big achievement. And that must make you proud. You're getting your app to all these people and it's really benefiting them. And it's just incredible that the amount of people you can help with this, because it's so open to everybody. There's not one person that you couldn't benefit looking after your mind and thinking better and taking better actions.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. I mean, when we launched our benchmark zero, we had no previous experience in this space and in app development or any of that. So, yeah, there really isn't a day that goes by that we're not incredibly grateful to have reached that number of people. But even more so now, you know, before we hit record, I was telling you a little bit about some research we're doing, but actually seeing, you know, users, not even seeing, I should say listening to users talk about, you know, how the Keo has helped them with their PTSD or work through, you know, really tough, stressful moments. So it's those things that we're really proud of, because at the very beginning, we really set a core purpose, and it was, you know, if we can help dial in and bring out healthy minds for the individual person, then the odds of that individual going out in this world and doing great work and helping others are exponentially higher. So, and that still is our purpose. So it's been nice to see that exponential part seems to be taking place. There's more work to be done, obviously, but you know, we're making the right strides forward, I think.
Mark, do you recall a specific ha-ha moment that led to the launch of your business?
I do, actually. It was when, like I said, I spent about 10 or 12 years personally doing practices like this. And the aha moment that caused a detailed email to be sent to my brother-in-law and co-founder of Keo was, I was listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast, and quite consistently, actually. And there came a point where we talked a little bit about this before, but where there was just this realization that every time I listened to the podcast, I'd be mentally or physically noting down such powerful questions or reflections that were left from every single guest that he interviewed, and then started seeing that really quite obviously, they're quite in an obvious way, I should say, from really any podcast host. And then obviously the books and whatnot, but it was really Tim's podcast, consistently seeing that pattern and writing down those questions and thinking, wow, that's tremendously beneficial for me right now. Because that's the thing, like, we're not inventing questions, we're not inventing templated journals or anything like that. They exist, but the difference is that when I heard a question that resonated with me from Tim Ferriss's podcast, it was important and it resonated with me because it was at that time in my life. And that was the insight, that how can we create something for people that evolves with them? So that's why I mean, obviously, you know, it's hard to manage 175,000. Could be overwhelming, and that's not what people in the app see, but they see questions and content that resonate with them right now in their life. And I think that's what's key, because our life today will be different tomorrow, and I truly do feel that so should the questions. They should continue to evolve and continue to push us and help us expand and grow. And you typically get that from people that you idolize, or from people you're looking up to or you want to learn from. So that's where the aha moment came, was how do we, provide this insight? And it's not coming from us, Keo, as a company. Even, we have some content from us specifically, but it's more so coming from all of these experts around the world, and not only meditation coaches or yoga instructors. Like, it's coming from Michelin star chefs and designers and entrepreneurs and executives at Lego and things like that are more relatable to the general public, to show that anyone can do this, and it doesn't require a week-long silent retreat, which these are all beneficial things, but that's not the place to start, right? It starts with your commute to and from the office, where you take a bit of time for your mind, or a few minutes before you start your day while you're making your coffee. It's just finding those micro moments of reflection that I think could be a real game changer in your life in general.
Little steps every day towards your end destination. What really motivates you to jump out of bed every single morning?
It's going to sound a bit cliche, but it really is these conversations, because when starting this, I never imagined, the podcast never started as, it wasn't planned to host a podcast or really interview. Even before the podcast, it was written interviews. That was never mapped out as a plan. It happened organically, and has really fueled a lot, I think, of the exposure and valuable content that we have in the whole ecosystem. And so it's these conversations that really light me up, because it's, connecting with people like yourself that have incredible things to offer from your own life experiences. Not only does this benefit, our community, it also, the byproduct of that, I'm developing as a person as well. So, even though I've had a lot of these practices for many years, the last 2 years I feel like have been almost accelerated. It's almost like those 10 or 12 years have been packed now into 2, just from the sheer volume of conversations and just trying new things and being open to exploring other practices. It's that really gets me up each day. And obviously just seeing the impact, and not from a numbers perspective, but like I said, just hearing, other people mentioning how whether it's the podcast or the app, how it's benefited them and their life. And it's getting to the point now, which is really cool to see, especially in such a digital environment. But here where I'm located in Toronto, Canada, it's happened a couple times where I've been in a cafe with a Keo t-shirt or something like that, and someone reaches over randomly and says, "Oh, I love the app." And that's, to me, just there's millions of people in this city, so it's really interesting to have that happen. So that makes me smile, because it means that hopefully we're obviously doing some good work, and it's starting to resonate with people.
Definitely, that's really rewarding when people are recognizing the brand in the street. It won't be long before you're a household name, Mark. What sets your business apart, and what unique need are you filling for your customers?
That's a great question. And, if I had to boil it down to really one core aspect, I really think it's the way that we're approaching the topic or content of the, whether it's journaling or really any of the other practices. And it started with just shifting the narrative or the language around what this is. And so I've mentioned it before, but I often talk about this in reference of mental fitness, which encompasses mental health and encompasses, performance or mental resilience. All of these things are under that mental fitness umbrella. And we're really focusing on talking about these practices in a way of, again, unlocking your mind, but also protecting it from all of the content and just all the stimulus that's out there, and not trying not to focus too heavily on mental health only, since there's such a huge stigma associated to mental health, which, I mean, we're mental health is a huge component to what we're doing, and it's becoming more and more prominent in our work. But our language around this is really, just like you prioritize fitness for your body, let's talk about how you can prioritize fitness for your mind. Because at the end of the day, it's your mind telling you to go to the gym. And, I'm a bit biased, but I feel like if you had to pick one, you should really prioritize your mind, and everything else will start falling into place. So, so we're really focusing on just changing that language and allowing people to listen and have an open mind to it versus being shut down right away if, I talk about journaling or meditation and people, immediately jump to, someone meditating in a robe on, in Tulum or something like that, which again, there's nothing wrong with any of that, but it shuts down the conversation and doesn't typically allow for the true benefits to come out, right? So we're trying to change that language to make it more digestible in our modern world.
Yes, I totally understand what you're saying. And I do 10 minutes on a morning, 10 minutes on an evening, and I can't believe how much of an impact that has on the way I think, the way I act throughout the day. And that's just 10 minutes on a morning and 10 minutes on an evening before I sleep. It has a big impact. And some people think you have to spend hours, and you don't. It's just about clearing your mind and making space for a better way of thinking, isn't it, Mark?
Exactly. A few minutes can go
Why?
a long way.
I agree totally. Why is your service especially important in today's modern world?
I love that question because I think we're at a bit of a crossroads in general society right now where we're our mind is just flooded. If you think, there's been a lot of talk over the last few years around just minimalism, right? And typically, and the reason I bring this example up is because I think when you can relate to living a minimalistic life in the physical world, everyone kind of understands that. But people don't think about, if I thought about my mind as a physical room, what does it look like? Is it jammed full of boxes, floor to ceiling? Is it neatly organized and I can navigate through? Or is it a mix of both of those scenarios? And so when you think of it from that perspective, that's where there's a tremendous amount of self-awareness that comes through that process, right? Because I think in today's world, we have to prioritize our mind. There's no way around it, or we're going to physically burn out. Something's going to happen. The wall's going to come up, and we've heard so many stories around that, right? For everyone listening, something has to give, right? It's like you can't put a brick on the gas pedal of a car and just run it full throttle forever, which is essentially what we're doing to our mind because it never shuts off. And other than when we sleep, and I mentioned sleep a bit before, but we're statistically not sleeping enough. And even if we were, it's just not enough to heal the body at this point based on the environment, right? With the amount of content and the amount of things that put us in that constant reactionary mode, right? Which just induces a ton of stress. So I think it's absolutely essential. It's if we don't, and again, there's so many different things that we can do for our mind, and it just really depends on what works for you to get started. But something has to start, right? It's that classic airline example. If you don't put please put your oxygen mask on first before helping others. We've all heard it, and that's the same thing when it comes to any of this mental fitness related topics that I've been bringing up. We have to prioritize our health because at the end of the day, anyone knows, even when you get a bad cold, right? You're out of the game. So all of a sudden, or if you break your leg, or if you're faced with some sort of traumatic physical injury or mental health related injury, what's left, right? Like you can't function. You can't function forget your business, forget your family, your friends. You just can't show up. So but we only see that when we actually hit those milestones, right? Or we hit those events, or hit the wall, as many people talk about it. So then how do we not do that, right? Or how do we prevent it as much as possible?
You have made some great points there. Social media is such a great thing, but it does take a lot of the day and it can be slightly addictive, and our brains are going 10 to the dozen. It's so important to have inner peace and give yourself space and time to clear your mind. And like you say, Mark, more now than ever. Now, can you share more details on the kinds of services and products that you offer?
Yeah, I mean, the general public offering or service is, it's designed for each individual personally, which translates directly into any corporate or any type of actual workplace work that you're doing. Because if you're only showing up to work, 50%, from a mental fitness standpoint, or your mind, or you're stressed, or you're just not there, then that obviously has a direct result in your productivity and the quality of your work. So, we're really trying to focus on, regardless of what it is, whether it's the podcast conversations or the actual app in itself, we're really trying to focus on the individual. And the offering is really simple. The app is a place for you to start and finish your day, or again, depending on how you want to use this, throughout the day. It doesn't matter, but the whole idea is somewhere in the day to prioritize a few minutes for your mind to either release emotion that is bothering you, that's worrying you, or practice some gratitude in terms of things that are going really well in your life. And there's really, it's so powerful, right? If you're upset or something's bothering you, you can instantly change your mindset by practicing, thinking of something that made you really smile in the last 24 hours. It's instant, right? You're out of that negative mindset by flipping that smile on your face and thinking those thoughts. So, like, these are the type of things that we're trying to offer the general public. And then when going into corporations, it's the same thing. It's just tailored to that company and the type of people that are in the company. So again, the narrative and the content that's being displayed to help people get started is relatable. And I think that's really the key, is really the relatability, in presenting any of these practices, and to make them seem very much accessible, and that they can understand the stories and the insights and the questions that are being left from different experts around the world, because it resonates with their line of work.
Mark, I am loving this conversation because everything you're saying, they're all practices that I practice. And you just touched on a great one there, which is gratitude. Every day when I get up, I journal in my journal all the things that I'm grateful for in my life. When I'm in bed at night, just falling off to sleep, I start visualizing all the great things that in my life that I'm grateful for. And I really agree with you that it has such a great impact on the way that you feel, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. And the crazy thing about all of this, I mean, like I mentioned, I've been doing a lot of these things for many years, but just being able to launch a new business, and this whole app and the whole ecosystem that surrounds it, myself along with the entire team, we've had to use our own practices and others that people have left with us throughout the journey, just so that we stay on a level playing field, and are able to operate at our highest potential. So there's been an element of validation while also launching the company, or while launching the company at the same time. So I'm that's probably one of the things I'm most grateful for. It's just the byproduct of doing this is living a more fulfilled and happy life.
I would imagine you have all sorts of client success stories. What is one that really stands out to you?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm just trying to think, just because we're in the thick of some great research from a lot of our community, and I think I'll share a little bit more of a generalization. But whenever we see people writing in related to how this practice has really helped pull them out of a negative mindset. Someone just mentioned the other day about how they suffer from PTSD, and journaling and having access to all these questions appropriately for the time that they're in their life right now has really helped them get through some of those struggles and panic attacks as well. As someone just said the other day, when it's coming on, I can load up Keo immediately. It doesn't matter where I'm at, and that's where the tech benefit comes into play, that they can load it up and immediately practice some gratitude and calm that anxiousness down, and whatever's processing through their head. And then just through a lot of the interviews, and this not necessarily directly related to Keo, but related to the practice. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of people that literally taking the time for their mind to reflect like this has saved their life. And I can't think of anything more gratifying than knowing that something that we're working on and putting out there has that potential. And that's what really, keeps the whole team going each and every day.
I can't think of anything more satisfying than knowing you're making a difference to people's personal development and self-improvement, Mark. Can you share, how do clients typically hear about you? And are there certain life moments that usually lead to them seeking you out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think typically people hear from us throughout, or from the podcast. That's been a big source of traffic for us, because like I said, we're just starting to explore with some social media ads, just specifically only for the podcast actually, but that usually leads people over to the app and the work we're doing. And then the other area is just the network in general, when it comes to the companies that we're working with, or that there's executives involved on the podcast or that are featured in the app. And like I said, they're LinkedIn or Lego and different companies like that. Then all of a sudden there becomes a lot of word of mouth happening in that situation. LinkedIn has been a big one as well for us, in terms of just, I feel like that platform itself is really going through a bit of a rebirth over the last couple of years, and has led to a tremendous amount of reach. We just ran the first ever on our side hashtag campaign on LinkedIn, specifically for the youth, or around 18 to 34, let's say, titled "Being Human," and it was really to just get people talking about some struggles and what type of practices they found helpful to manage those emotions as they're coming up. And it was a 48-hour campaign that I kicked off with very little followers on LinkedIn for myself personally, but through the network we were able to reach 1.4 million people in those 48 hours. And then created a free resource in the app based on all the comments that were coming through of the different practices and the reflective prompts. So people are finding out about the work that we're doing kind of through a lot of different channels, social media. We're trying to, because I think you mentioned it earlier, but just social media is a huge reason for a lot of our stress, and so are our smartphones and tech, which we're directly in. So we're trying to figure out how can we flip that perception and help people develop a better relationship with technology and social media because they're not going away. But how, if we can reframe the relationship, then all of a sudden things like being human and all these practices, the benefits start opening up because of the reach and the tech. So sorry, long-winded answer, but the short answer really is, if people are following us on social media, I mean, we're trying to post really positive things and help people pop out of autopilot and do a bit of reflection. So that's a great way to follow the journey and the podcast. And obviously, if you're working at any of some of those bigger tech companies that we've been working with, there's only more to come.
You are doing incredible things in this world, Mark. Is there anything we did not cover that you would like to share?
Well, first of all, thank you, Mark. The questions were fantastic, and it's a real treat to be able to chat with you and your listeners. My only thing would be just for people to embrace and open on mental fitness in general, and don't be scared to try new things and different things. And there might be some stereotypes or perceptions around some of these different practices that have been picked up along the way, and I had those as well, and I still have them in certain areas. But just try something and try, just like running may not be for one person, but elliptical or a spin bike might be appropriate for you. It's the same thing when it comes to mental fitness, and give it a shot, because it could really, really dramatically change your days, day by day, ultimately leading to some really great health benefits and benefits for all of us living in this world.
Mark, I have really enjoyed our conversation today. Can you share with our listeners, how can they get their hands on this amazing app? How can people connect with you? How can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, the easiest way, I'm pretty accessible. I'm most active on LinkedIn. So if you just search my name, Marc Champagne, I'm sure you'll have that in the notes. But it's Marc with a C and Champagne spelled exactly like the bubbly. Send over an invite. Would love to connect. Kyo is all over on the socials as Kyo app. So KYO APP. Right now we're available for iOS or Apple, but we're working towards Android options. So the actual app you can find in the App Store just by searching that. But the podcast is available for all devices, all platforms, and available on Spotify, Apple, all the major distribution channels. So yeah, just reach out. I mean, we're a small team. We check our messages. Would love to hear from you.
Thank you so much for being on the Brilliance Business Show, Mark.
Thank you.
You have been listening to the Brilliance Business Show. I am your host, Mark Stephen Pooler. Until next time, goodbye.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.